I would have to have negative levels of self-awareness and also an ego large enough to be the co-host for Anna Kasparian to take any sort of credit for the foresight that the For the People Act, Senate Bill number 1, formerly H.R. 1, that it would get the 60 votes and it would just end up dead in the Senate. Yeah, there's no way I could take credit for that proclamation. It was just, the writing was on the wall. It was so obvious for everybody out there. And yeah, it hit the Senate, couldn't break the filibuster, fucking dead. It would have faced several other hurdles, even if it did magically pass the Senate, but hey, we got another bill on the horizon. It's a little bit different. It still looks to attack the same fundamental principles that H.R. 1 was going to, but this one has a fancy name attached to it. Oh, somebody who is a civil rights icon. And because it's named after somebody that the left idolizes, somebody who was around during civil rights time and kept championing that over and over again, not really doing anything other than just being a simple race hustler. It's gotta be good, right? It's the John Lewis Act, and John Lewis is definitely one of those people you should hold up as being a hero and not being a race-baiting piece of shit like he actually was. Just a little refresher course. John Lewis effectively killed MAGA 1.0 with slander and lies. And it's always good to bring up a picture of Herman Cain, because that guy right there, if the old establishment Republicans would have just let him run against Barack Obama in 2012, the world would be a hell of a lot different right now. And he's a great man and he deserves a deep dive in and of his own right. But outside of the picture and a little bit of the headline there, we're not going to really be touching on him. We are going into the history of John Lewis. Okay, just so you know the namesake of this really awful bill that's going to be heading up to the Senate. Once again, just another bill that's just going to die a horrific death. And because this one has a name attached to it, oh, this one's the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and you guys, the Republicans didn't want to pass it because they're racist. Look forward to that one. The late Representative John Lewis of Georgia was a great American, and a courageous leader of the civil rights struggle. Sure he was. He's cut from the same cloth as Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. I don't give him that kind of respect. A fucking leech that just ended up cashing a government check. Which is exactly why it was wrong of him to claim the Tea Party was racist and that he had the N-word used against him in 2010. It was late March and the House of Representatives was about to vote on Obamacare, which Democrats were pushing through on a party line vote. Tens of thousands of protesters, many affiliated with the Tea Party, gathered at the Capitol. Joel Pollack, who wrote this, was there for the protest. It was passionate, but it was also civil. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, oh my God, it's 11 years ago, how little has actually changed, was jeered when she and fellow Democrats, including Lewis, staged a provocative march through the crowd. But that was it. Yeah. No N-words, no drinks being knocked out of Nancy Pelosi's hands. It was a completely and totally innocuous, well, kind of display of force, because I would have imagined they would have had guards around them, because you can't be seen shoulder to shoulder with the plebs even back in 2010. Their disgust for the populace was still just as palpable. Lewis then made the extraordinary claim, reported by McClatchy, that demonstrators had shouted the N-word at him and at fellow members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Other members of the caucus claimed they heard it too. Okay, this is 2010, and phone technology isn't quite the same as it was before, but wouldn't you think that either some guards that were there, people in the crowd, would have been videotaping said event, especially if they were going to make a big spectacle out of this? Wouldn't you think maybe even just one person who could have been outraged, could have been there under great pretenses, just to be a part of the Tea Party movement, being there, taking a video camera footage of that, and then coming forward with even just some evidence to support this claim? But as you can see, the incendiary claim was picked up by mainstream media. Remember, this was 2010. Republican leaders rushed to condemn the protesters, sounding a little bit like, oh, I don't know. I think there was something like, what was that, February, December, January. I think it was January or something. Something where a bunch of terrible people all got together and caused a whole bunch of deaths and damage and destruction. I don't know. It sounds familiar, but I haven't seen it referenced enough in literally every publication I look through. Anyways, maybe I just made it up. The Tea Party was tarnished permanently by Lewis's accusations of racism. It became a toxic brand to many Americans, but it was not true. Somehow, the thousands of cameras present, yup, No one filmed evidence of Lewis's claim. Andrew Breitbart, who was still very much alive at the time, offered $10,000 and then $100,000 to the United Negro College Fund if video evidence emerged. It never did. Yep, the Tea Party was a force to be reckoned with back in those days, because that was a couple years after Obama had assumed the presidency. He was going to come forward with all this change and all this hope, and then it was just more business as usual. And that's what the Tea Party was out there against. They were tired with their own political party running John McCain and him performing about as badly as a Republican had since about the fucking Goldwater ticket. Sick of the establishment types running the party, not listening to the concerns of the citizenry, and going out there making their voices heard, not being racists, cleaning up after themselves. Another parallel you can draw there as well. But no. One hustler who's been doing the same song and dance for as long as anybody can remember went out there, said that he heard the N-word a few times and he got spit on as well, but when asked to provide any proof, any sort of claims to back this up, no, we just gotta believe all black men. And 11 years have passed since that fateful day, and nothing has changed whatsoever, now has it? So now we have a little background on the said bill that is going to be going through as well, because H.R. 4 was actually passed. It was first presented at the end of 2019. It's just been hanging around in Congress, and now it's going to have a couple of different updates. And then it's going to go up to the Senate, where, like I said, it's just going to end up dying another death. But there's going to be more outrage because the great St. Louis was attached to the naming convention. Jubilant Republicans hail Tuesday's defeat of S1, but it is not likely to be the last battle in Democrats' campaigns to federalize presidential and congressional elections. This bill wouldn't have made it easier to vote. Senator Mike Lee, I think he's the most conservative senator out there. He's just a really fucking base dude and one of the best senators currently elected. So weird considering who he shares a state with as a federal senator. Declared on Fox News after the Democrats failed to gain 60 votes required to break a Republican filibuster against a proposal known as the For the People Act. The House passed a version of the measure, H.R. 1, in March. The bill would make it easier to vote illegally. This is the Corrupt Politicians Act, and I'm glad we defeated it. Yeah, exactly. Like we went through it yesterday. The only people who actually support this are the currently elected Democrats, mostly because they're the biggest beneficiaries of it. All of the little proposals that are in there individually when they are polled, we looked at Monmouth, not exactly some kind of backwater poll, okay? This is a refutable, respectable poll that was conducted. And things like voter identification, mail-in ballots, early balloting, all of that was polled, okay? And among a whole host of other issues. And the common sense out there, the people that think, yeah, okay, mail-in ballots, you should probably have a reason as to why you can't vote on the date. Early voting, same thing. It was just about the same when they were polled on those issues as well. And also voter identification was like at 80%, so once again, are you representing the people that you're supposedly elected to represent, or are you just representing you, your party, and your own interests for your own job security measures? I'm asking questions. That was Tuesday. On Wednesday, conservatives and Republican strategists warn that Democrats on Capitol Hill will now lick their wounds, regroup, and come back later this year with another bill that will likely be even worse. Exactly. Because every time that they're defeated, do they sit back and think, Jesus, you know what? Some of our policies just aren't that popular. You know what? Maybe we should go ahead and rethink, because there is room to make elections more secure, make elections more accessible for people. I'm not against that. I don't think anybody reasonable is against that. There are just certain standards that are out there. And if you guys wanted to show a good argument, put forth something in good faith, you know what? You might have bipartisan support. You might be able to go ahead and pass this through and everybody could get on board. But as we've seen before, whenever Democrats get defeated, all they do is just double down. They just coil back for a few months and then they come back even harder with all the ists and the obes and the isms that they can possibly think of. And then they're coming right for you. So, especially with this one, I can see the writing on the wall right now. And if it's true, and if this is the approach that they're going to be taking, oh yeah, I'll definitely be taking credit for this one, because I haven't heard this one yet, but we'll see. The next Democratic effort will use a measure passed in the House in 2019 known as the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act of H.R. 4. H.R. 4 is an unconstitutional piece of legislation that would give the federal government veto power over states' election integrity laws. Heritage Action for America Vice President Garrett Bess told the Epoch Times Wednesday. It does a lot of the same things that H.R. 1 was trying to target specifically, except it just kind of takes it out and then it just kind of wants a more generalized view on things. It wants to take control of the districts in each of the states. It's more concerned about the geography and the different districts within each state. It's less concerned about the methods than H.R. 1, but it's still just as bad for different reasons. Same overall issue being discussed. It's just approaching it a little bit differently. The Pelosi power grab would alter and weaponize the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to give massive amounts of power to unelected bureaucrats in Washington to take away voter ID and legalize ballot trafficking across the country. No member of Congress should support it, Bess declared. Yeah. Now, to be fair, that could be a very partisan take on things, but it's not terribly far off. Pelosi laid the groundwork for H.R. 4 later this year, on June 8th in a letter to House Democrats.
In addition, it is essential that H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, thank you, John, for your sacrifice. Good morning, Sunday morning. Become law. When we pass H.R. 4, we must do so in a way that is ironclad constitutionally. Sorry, I didn't get mad at the end of that, so perhaps the impression is incomplete. This is what Congressman Butterfield and the House Judiciary Committee had worked hard for. H.R. 4 must be passed, but it will not be ready until the fall, and it is not a substitute for H.R. 1. That's actually pretty fair, though. Like S1, H.R. 4 would effectively put the Department of Justice a little bit different, okay? Because H.R. 1 wanted to create another body for elections to be controlled by, and this one just slaps it into the incompetent hands of the Department of Justice. I don't really trust them to do much either, but hey, this is what this bill would want. In control of future presidential and congressional elections, according to the constitutional lawyer Hans von Sapolsky of the Conservative Heritage Foundation. The Lewis Act sounds great until you realize it would be used to achieve a partisan political gain rather than prevent racial discrimination, which is something that, if you're going to title it with a civil rights icon, should be something that you should be taking a look at. Something, content of character, something, not color of skin. The real aim is to reverse the 2013 Supreme Court decision in Shelby County v. Holder and to give the political allies of Democrats, the radicals who inhabit the career ranks of the Civil Rights Division of the United States Justice Department, where I used to work, and advocacy groups such as the ACLU control over state election rules, von Sapolsky observed. Interesting. What makes H.R. 4 a perfect vehicle for a renewed Democratic push to federalize elections is the Lewis bill would restore Section 5 of the 1965 Civil Rights Act that the 2013 court decision struck down. Okay, Section 5 subjected all of 9 southern states and parts of 6 more to a pre-clearance process for even the most minute details of how those jurisdictions conducted presidential and congressional elections. I already know that there's a constitutional amendment, I'm pretty sure it's 10, that allows states to determine how they conduct their elections, so let's see. The original Section 5 was based on a formula using voter turnout data from the 60s when blacks were often unable to vote in the South. Congress failed to renew the formula in 2006, von Sapolsky said, because that was the year black turnout often matched or exceeded white turnout. Yeah, in the South, in certain states, definitely. In that case, the affected states would be freed of the pre-clearance process and thus regain their constitutionally mandated full sovereignty over the elections, reviving the pre-clearance process and turning H.R. 4 into a vehicle of including selected items for the Democrats' grab bag of election reforms, and S1 explained mail-in voting, legalizing vote harvesting, providing federal tax dollars to campaign, banning voter ID requirements would simply require adoption of a package of amendments. See what happens here? They could justify changes in one state, or rather a whole host of states, based on what a different state, a blue state, would be doing.
But all of this comes from the speculation of a couple of guys who could be perceived as being on the right, okay? Or maybe they just read the text of it and came up with that deduction. That's always possible as well. But what's the other side of the aisle saying, okay? What's their interpretation? What is this soy-filled individual? That motherfucker right up there, right by the headline, Zach, which sounds like something he likes placed across the bridge of his nose. What is his interpretation of this? National Democrats have talked about passing voting rights legislation over and over again, and two pieces of legislation are often mentioned in the same breath. The For the People Act, dead, and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act, sometimes referred to as H.R. 4, and while H.R. 1 has rocketed through the House and is going to be shut down, H.R. 4 is facing the same fate. But it's currently just waiting in the wings in order to be retooled, rejiggered, and repassed through the House in order to get back up to the Senate. It was originally passed, yes, for the 116th Congress back in 2020, around the same time that all the stupid impeachment version 1 was going through the House as well, so they just were able to sneak this one in under the line. Lawmakers reenacted a formula based on a 40-year-old fact, having no logical relationship to the present day. I guess that's your spin on it, pal. Chief Justice John Roberts, you know, that man who's very known for having very based takes on things, wrote at the time, despite thousands of pages of evidence Congress accumulated in 2006 when the Voting Rights Act was reauthorized for 25 years, we cannot pretend that we are reviewing an updated statute or try our hand at updating the statute ourselves based on the new record compiled by Congress. The High Court notably did not strike down the preclearance requirement entirely. Well, see, it's still there, so they didn't strike it down, so we can use it whenever we want. But without a formula to decide which jurisdictions are covered by it, it is left entirely unenforceable. Yay! Enter the VRAA. It is an attempt by Congress to restore the formula, or for it to be shut down once and for all. Your interpretation. But here's an attempt at a distinction. While H.R. 1 and H.R. 4 are often mentioned together by Democrats, they are on very different paths. H.R. 1 is already in the hands of the Senate, but H.R. 4 has not been formally reintroduced in the House of Congress. That is intentional. The bill's lead sponsor in the House said recently, "We look forward to building that evidentiary record." Yeah, because they want to pass H.R. 1. It's not successful. So then they're trying to Trojan horse this in. Oh yeah, it's something totally different, even though it's going to accomplish the exact same stuff that we want H.R. 1 to do. It's just named something different. And it is achieved through different methods. Representative Terry Sewell, of Alabama, a Democrat, said at a recent press briefing from the Southern Poverty Law Center, oh my god, another terrible institution, but of course, bad people tend to congregate together, saying the House was planning a number of hearings to build a case to defend the bill from an inevitable court challenges should it actually become law. Yeah, because it sucks, and it was struck down in 2013, and there's been a couple of changes on the court, but it doesn't look like it's changed in the ways that would make this bill be interpreted as anything constitutional. We'll just see what one of the sponsors had to say about this. Said from Judiciary Committee and the House Administration Subcommittee on Elections would start in April. There's a hearing entitled Voting in America, Ensuring Free and Fair Access to the Ballot in the subcommittee on Thursday, and could last through May and June. I think that's the earliest that I would be introducing it, she said. I suspect that the bill won't be reintroduced or voted on until September because we have an August recess as well. Yes, you got to go out there and you got to enjoy that August long weekend and have a fucking pisser of a time out there. Of course, can't make elected officials work too hard. And how are you going to spend that 6-digit salary if you don't have time to spend with your friends and your family? But yeah, so we know what the bill looks like right now. But it's going to have to get reintroduced into the not House of Commons. I'm talking about Canada later. The House of Representatives. So it could look completely different, okay? It could be more like H.R. 1, or it could be just a more refined version of what we have right here with H.R. 4 at the moment. It could be more covert and much more agreeable to the untrained eye. But we know it's still going to have the same amount of support in the House, and it'll have the same amount of support in the Senate, and if Joe Biden is still around come fall, he might still have the same amount of support as he does right now. And we know his feelings on election reforms. Yeah, I'm all for it because the racism in the South is just so bad, and let me tell you about integrated busing situations. Joe, this isn't the 70s anymore. But apparently that's where he left his mind, because this is a first-hand account from a Democratic House representative trying to have a conversation with this stuttering, muttering old fuck. It didn't go well. And this is another sign that as much as I'm pulling for Biden to make an entire term, because I don't want to see anything bad happen to anybody, few exceptions, but I'd love to see Joe debate Trump again in 2024. Nothing would make me happier. But this is just sad. It's getting even sadder. Joe Biden just sort of stared at me when I asked for support on election takeover bill. Oh my fucking god. This is a guy that we've heard from before too. Mondaire Jones said Wednesday President Joe Biden just sort of stared at me when Jones told Biden to be more involved in federalizing elections when Democrats seek to cancel state voter ID laws and publicly fund political campaigns. Jones told President Joe Biden their party needed him more involved in passing voting legislation on the Hill. Yeah, he's the most popular president of all time, and don't you dare look at any of the results to find out otherwise. I think somebody with such a strong voice and such an enthusiastic backing would definitely be able to lend some sort of credibility to this push, but when asked for support, I guess Joe didn't get his update quite yet. The Associated Press reported about an event last week in which the two met. In response, Biden just sort of stared at me, Jones said, describing an awkward silence that passed between the two. But did he follow it up with anything? No. He just kind of had one of his definitely not dementia moments because he's hard to keep up with, according to Jen Psaki, and he's definitely of sound mind and body, according to the doctors at CNN. President Obama, for his point, has been doing more to salvage our ailing democracy than the current president of the United States of America, Jones told the AP in his terms about federalizing of elections. Oh my God. See, this is the problem with the leftists out there. You can never be too far to the left for them. Eventually, you'll get cannibalized by them. Breitbart News reported Tuesday that the White House protected Biden from the failed attempt by the Senate Democrats to federalize elections. Biden was kept safe from political fallout, while Vice President Kamala Harris was sent to join the display of righteous indignation from Democrats after the bill failed to advance with a partisan vote of 50-50. That could be explained because she's also the president of the Senate right now before she gets a potential promotion. And realistically, I think Biden knows how the Senate works, or used to, considering how much time he spent there. So he kind of figured it was going to be dead on arrival. So you could explain that other ways, but you could also look at it as like, ooh, Kamala Harris is in the loop and Joe Biden's being kept out by his handlers. Either interpretation is fair. Biden did not even address the issue publicly on camera Tuesday. Yeah, it's a weekday. He doesn't go on camera that often. What's shocking about this? Deciding instead to hold the event at the White House to underscore the upcoming fire and drought season in the summer. Yeah, and not address anything about clearing any dead trees or doing any sort of forest clear up. No, that's racist or something. I don't know how they justify not doing a practice that literally the rest of the world and most other states do, but hey, that's your thoughts and opinions. I don't give a fuck. So yeah, we can look forward to HR 1 or whatever it's going to be called when it gets reintroduced, coming through probably late summer, early fall. But it'll still have the same name because John Lewis, oh man, he was quite the individual. He was around for a lot of important events, campaigned on the fact that he was there for them, couldn't really cite any sort of accomplishments he made along the way, but he was definitely there for them, and therefore he should be somebody who's taken seriously on these things. Fuck off, John. I'm glad you got to enjoy a nice funeral that was well attended by all of your former Democratic compadres. Meanwhile, regular people had to mourn at home when Grandma kicked the bucket over the past year and a half. But that was only made possible because of one thing and one pandemic which looms large, and it looks like a governmental body is finally going to be delving into that dang old lab leak theory that's out there. It's not coming from the Democrats. It's coming from the other side of the aisle. And boy, it's going to be a humdinger to talk about. Hopefully it stays up long enough for everybody to see it. With that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Catch y'all later.